So, welcome back. So what's in the box? And what is a VNA? And why do we need one? A VNA is a vector network analyzer. One of the smallest and cheapest ones, and many others are available, is a NanoVNA. And that's what we're going to have a look at today. So, one of the many uses of a VNA, or vector network analyzer, is for looking at antenna performance. Now normally, the only indication we get about what our antenna doing is the SWR. And SWR is one-dimensional. You can pick a frequency and you can transmit on it, and then you can measure the reflected power. It's really related to the impedance of the antenna. That's what you're actually measuring. We just use SWR as a representation, and we pick a spot frequency on each band. You key your transmitter up on a low power, you test the SWR, and then you go, well, that's fine, I can transmit on this frequency now, and I can transmit on this band, and rarely do you move up 100 kilohertz and check it again. You trust it. You know, we all do it. It's just a practice. Wouldn't it be nice to see what's really going on? Behold, toys. So I bought this for under 50 quid. And this is just the menu structure. Pretty scary. And there's the menu structure in Chinese. So yeah, it's going to be quite an experience. But what is it? So years ago, many years ago, I think it was about 1978, I worked for Dana Communications in Cheshire as a young kid of about 19. And one of the first 8 jobs I had to do was to set up the IF strip on a Raycal HF receiver. Now the IF strip on one of those things has got more electronics in it than a modern radio. There were ICs in it, but there were a lot of discrete components. And I was presented with a trolley and the tool of the day, which was a spectrum analyzer. So bearing in mind, in 1978, a spectrum analyzer, Hewlett-Packard one mind, that I was using in my job, within a couple of weeks of being there, cost £250,000. That's how much technology it took to make a tool. This does almost the same thing. Not the same quality, not the same number of samples, but it cost 40 odd quid. And it's amazing. It's amazing in many ways. So I'm going to take you through some of the things it does. I am not going to do them all. I could make videos for months about what this tool does. And lots of other people have made those sorts of videos. So if you want to get into the high end of what it can do, because it doesn't just work with antennas, as you can see it's got 2 sockets on it. So you can use one as an input and the other one as an output. You can measure the losses through filters. It has its own built-in RF generator. So you can test antennas for frequencies you can't even transmit on. It puts out a tiny amount of power, so there's never any risk of damage, even for a horrendous SWR. Part of the calibration procedure is to short it out and to run it into an open circuit and to run it into a 50 ohm load. So we have these 3 loads here. And when we calibrate it, because this only does 100 points of measurement on any frequency range that you calibrate it for. So if you're measuring 0 to 30 megahertz on your antenna to check the SWR of it, you'll only get 100 points. So if you go down to the 20 metre band, there'll be 2 or 3 points in that band, which is not very accurate. So what you would do is you would calibrate it again for the 20 metre band. So you calibrate it from 14.0 to 14.350 in the UK. You would then get 100 points of measurement in that band. And some interesting technology that is exclusive to this type of analyzer. So if you've used professional equipment, previously to do these tasks, you won't recognise the terminology. It uses expressions like DUT for device under test, because it can test any type of device. And then you've got port 11 and port 2, which is also called port 21. I'm not even going to try and explain why that is. It's a convention. And this is how complicated the display in it can be. You can have 3 or 4 different traces, I think there's 4, and it's very, very technical to set up. So you need a little bit of patience. And you also need a stylus ideally. Now I'm seeing that's quite bright, so I'm going to have to adjust the camera. So I'm going to stop there and see if I can change the camera settings. Okay, so I've just done some testing with some different cameras, and I'm very aware that you won't be able to see the menus on this thing. And it's kind of important because that's most of the important thing about it. As regards the display, that's going to be less of an issue because I've downloaded a couple of applications from NanoVNA.com that allow me to display it on the computer. And not only display it, they allow me to drive it from the computer. And one of the first things we have to do with the NanoVNA, or any VNA I believe, is to calibrate it. And we do that using 3 dummy loads. And we've got an open circuit, a closed circuit and a 50 ohm load. So one's entirely brass and got a centre pin in, one's entirely brass and got no centre pin in, so it's going to shield the socket from the input, and the other one's a 50 ohm load. And for our purposes, we only need to calibrate them on port 1. Port 1 is all we'll be using, because all we're doing is sending a signal into the antenna and measuring the reflection. And when I say the reflection, I'm trying to discriminate between SWR, inductive reactance, capacitive reactance, and overall impedance, and this will all become relevant. And you'll also learn what a Smith diagram is, and that's pretty fascinating stuff, believe me. So I'm going to be looking down on this NanoVNA, and you can see I've already plugged it into the computer. It does contain internal NiCad batteries. It's got a 3.7 volt battery in that goes through a converter that pushes it up to 5 volts, because it's absolutely critical with measuring equipment that you have a stable and completely isolated power supply. There is no better isolated power supply than a battery. Don't know what that was. Oh, feedback, I've got my volume set too high. Yeah, we'll have a look at that. So the first thing I'm going to do is to calibrate it. So first, there's an order it has to be done in. And I appreciate you won't be able to see this on the screen. If we go back to the beginning, the main menu, it says calibrate. It's display, marker, stimulus, calibrate, recall. We want calibrate. Press calibrate again, and the first one it wants to test is the open circuit. So what we do is we get the open circuit load, dummy load, which has got nothing in it, but it will shield the input to prevent erroneous calculations. So we just pop that on there, it doesn't need to be too tight. We're going to measure my Dynam DX50, just as a starting point. For those who don't know, it's a UHF and VHF antenna. So we're going to set the start point to 125 megahertz. This is how we program it. You don't have to put all the zeros in. Click it again, we want the stop point at 170 megahertz. There's a reason why I like that frequency. It's because I like receiving things other than 2 meter radio. So we can now go back. Now we can calibrate it. So we go calibrate, we do the open circuit one, which is already on there. And that's all that happens. You just see a tick appear in the open circuit box. And it takes, the next one I highlighted is short circuit. Now I know that's a scary concept, but at low power RF frequencies, it's going to give us an accurate setup. And you can see the display's moving already as I'm putting it on. So we calibrate the short. There it is. You don't see a lot happen at this stage, but trust me, it's working. Now I'll put the 50 ohm load on. I guess you could calibrate this for other impedances, but amateur radio stuff is not all 50 ohms, but the majority of it is. So here's load. And there it is. And I'm aware this is a pen and not a proper stylus before you say anything. Oh, sorry, I haven't done. The other ones, we don't need anything connected for. And we have to do them just to complete the procedure. So isolation, this is going to check the isolation between that socket and that socket. We're not interested because we're not using this type of measurement. Then we can say done. It's quite important to I've forgotten what I was going to say. It does. These are previous calibrations I've stored. Now we're currently on this one, so that's fine. Now we can do some measurements. So to do measurements, I'm going to have to connect it to a BNC antenna. Now I know that's not ideal because you really want it on a little short wire. But when you're doing this type of measurement, that's going to introduce a time delay, which is going to muck it up. I did say muck. So what I've done to make life easier, I have downloaded NanoVNA Saver 0.5.4, and this connects to the NanoVNA through the serial port. Once you connect it, it will pick up the settings that I have set. So this is brilliant. There is another program where you have to type stuff in, and it works independently of what the NanoVNA is set to, which can be a good thing, but this one replicates what it's already set to. So these are the settings, 125 megs to 170 megs that I put in. Now then, I need to alter my scales, and I need to do that on the NanoVNA. And there it is. So here we can now see it on the screen. Bring that over. And our VSWR is at worst is to 2.8. Sorry, the spot frequency is 2. If we go all the way down here with our measurer, and right at the middle of the 2 meter band on 143 exactly, that should be a lot better. Aha! That's better. So it's 1.046 now. It's not reflecting it up here. On the display itself, that is almost 1 at the bottom. It's 1.046 SWR there, or 143 megs. And if I go down here to the air band, it's about 125. We can see it's at 2.3. It's still showing it in decibels on the other one. It's lovely when you don't know what you're doing. So here's our SWR. So it's at 2 point something at 125 megs. At 137 it's 1.08, give or take. 1.046, 2.3 up here, and then up at around 160 megahertz, 170 megs is 2.3. Now I wouldn't be transmitting on that band, it's just something I enjoy listening to. There's a lot of private mobile radio around. So that's basically what it does. I seem to have got yet another thing stuck on it. So it doesn't like me messing around with the screen. So that's your basic SWR measurements. So now we'll go on to our HF antenna. I'm going to demonstrate something to you now that I hope you'll find interesting. So I'll just set that up and I'll be back in a second. One moment please, as a famous person says. Okay, so switch back to the HF long wire. I'm rescanned on this, and I've rescanned on the screen. Obviously I'm on completely the wrong frequency. So I need to set my frequency range now to something in the HF band. So, stimulus, start. Oh, we need to calibrate all that. Okay, so I had a bit of a comms issue between my computer and the NanoVNA and the NanoVNA safer software. And I've also managed to figure out how to configure the displays. It's quite interesting. You can click display setup and then you can display a multiplicity of charts. I've turned them all off. Makes it simpler. We can see what we're doing. So this is my HF antenna. Now it's a sort of 15 metre random length. I'm not quite sure what I want it to be really. Do I want it to be a resonant quarter wave? Or do I want it to be a random length? And I've currently got a 4091 balun on it, or balun. And I'm getting some very interesting results, which you might notice. And I've not done any trimming on the antenna at all. In fact, it's not even got the tuning capacitor on the balun. So it's not perfect. And that's kind of why I got the NanoVNA. I want to make it perfect. I want to make it perform to the best of its ability. And I've always known, and I'm only working FT8 at the moment and Whisper, and listening to single sideband. And I've always noticed that when I set it up for FT8, I'm putting it through an ATU, and I barely need to change the settings to go from 40 metres to 20 metres to here. And even there, at 14 megs, if I put the marker where I want it, sorry, 21. So 21 megs. The SWR 7 up there, which is not good. But down here, I'm getting 1.7 on about 20 metres, and about 40 metres I'm getting 2.5. This is without the ATU. And then around here, which is about 80 metres, there's a bit of a dip. There, about 3.5. Sorry, where's the frequency I want? About 3.5 megs. So those look pretty horrendous. But that's straight into the antenna. What happens when I put my ATU in between? So, let's hold that thought. Now I'm going to plug the ATU in. Okay, so there's the trace we had before. Nice low SWR at 7 megs, nice low SWR at 14 megs. I'm now going to start the trace. So we've got a whole different scenario now. I just need to rerun this. There we go. So we've got something different going on. I'll do it on the screen because it's easier to see. So we're just 7.4 megs. We've got VSWR of 1.050. Now the ATU is on the last settings I was using, which was 40 metres FT8. So that's pretty much what you'd expect, because it's about 7.0, 7074. There aren't enough sampling points, but it would be around there. But notice also, there's a secondary dip around 17 megahertz, and there's another one around 24 megahertz. So, what is going to happen if I put my marker on 14.2. So watch that cursor, and I'm going to tune the ATU. just show you the ATU. There it is. And normally I only ever have to change the inductor. It's not going to sweep again, is it? Right, what I need to do is get this on 14.2. 14 point something, there we go. Okay, 13.894. Just make sure this isn't on pause. So just varying the inductor, I've now got a 1.2 SWR. If I tune the rest of it, so this is the input capacitor. Look at that, 1.072. I'll just run the sweep up here. And you can see there 1.1 on this screen. So if we come down a little bit, there we go, a perfect 1-to-1. The output capacitor is not making any difference at all now. The input capacitor has tuned it. Oh, it seems to have frozen again. I love it when things don't make a difference because the screen's paused. So that's the output capacitor. And as you can see, it's not having any real effect on that frequency. But what it is doing is it's changing the harmonic relationship. So now we're down to 1.06 there. So that's wonderful. Now, that's my calibration on 40 meters. Now, what happens if I move the marker to 14 megs? Sorry, that is 14 on that one. I am looking at two different things, aren't I? Sorry, that's 14 megs on both. So we want to go to 21, and I'm putting it just below 20, and I'm going to do the same on this one. Now that's a 1.089, and we can drop it even further just moving the output capacitor, and we haven't changed it at 7 megahertz, so we've now got two dips. Sorry, we haven't changed it to 14, it's still very low. So that's 1.028 there, and 1.026 there. So what's about 40 meters? That's 1.4. I'll just move it down on here. Close enough. So that's 1.479. That's quite usable. Now if we change the input capacitance, and the display doesn't pause, we could bring that down also. But to bring it down much more, we'd have to change the inductance. So with a couple of clicks, we've now got a perfect one on there. So the point I'm making, and this is only using a single trace, is that we can see a whole frequency spectrum. We can tune our antenna either by trimming the antenna or by using an ATU. And we can optimise it so that we don't need to change it much if we want a frequency hop or band hop. In Whispered, it's quite common practice for people to want to transmit on multiple bands, so they can get the relative propagation on those bands. It's one of the things that digital modes are all about. So I think that's really useful, and it's something you could spend hours on it with an SWR meter trying to optimise it, but here, because it's visual and because we're encompassing the whole HF spectrum, it's going to be quite simple. Now, what's going to happen at 21 megahertz? Now, I know this is an issue, because I have to change dramatically anyway. But even then, it's only 1.3. .1 there. So it's just so usable. I don't do 10 meters, my transceiver doesn't do it. But I could use all those bands with very little tweakery. I could set an optimized setting where I could work 3 or 4 bands with no degradation in performance. I think that's amazing. So let me just show you a bit more of what this thing does, because we've only touched on the SWR settings. So we're going to get complicated now. Let's just introduce some more displays. Trace. Trace 1 is showing, what is it showing? And you can change them, you can make them measure anything. I can't remember what it's set to. Let me find another one. So, this one is the Smith diagram. Try setting up 1. Scale, try setting up 0.2. 0.5. Now we can go bigger than that. 0.25. So, what does the Smith diagram tell us? And I may not be technically correct on this. If it was in dead centre, that would be 50 ohms, and we can move this cursor. And as we move it, it's telling us a number of things. Firstly, we're at 20.562 megahertz, and we're around 50 ohms. We're at 45 point something ohms. What it's telling us is, as we move in frequency, if it goes up, it becomes more capacitive. And somewhere on here it tells you. But that's what it's telling us. So the capacitive reactance is now 23 ohms, and the overall is 56. If we go the other way, it's an inductive component. So we're still only on 58 ohms total impedance and 17 megahertz. Now, you need to know a lot more about antenna theory than I do to understand what that means. But what it does mean is that over the whole range of the HF spectrum, from there, 1.9 megahertz, all the way up to 30 megahertz, we've got 100 points of measurement on there. So that's fascinating. And I can't remember what trace 3 is set to. And I don't know. There's something about the way I'm using it that's not quite correct. But just to show you, I suspect the scaling is wrong. Oh, this is the relative phase angle of the signal. So yeah, S21 phase. Now, that's nonsense. There's nothing connected to S21. So you can put my finger near it. Ignore that, it's nonsense. That trace is not set up. Trace 1 is though, and this is set to log mag, and I can't remember what log mag does. But you can go back and you can set it to something else. You could measure the resonance at different frequencies and measure the overall impedance. Not sure what's going on there. So the point I'm making is it's a very comprehensive device that can do a lot of things. And I'm sorry I didn't notice that I wasn't changing it up here as well. So that's still on the original settings. So I could add here the other traces. So I could set up here the phase. And there's the phase information. And again, that's phase 2.1. S11 we want. So this is the relative phase of the signal at all those frequencies. It's actually easier if I just show you on the left-hand display. So we can get the Smith chart up and we can run around all those settings. Group delay, again, anything that says S21 is on the other socket. There's the overall impedance of my antenna from 44 ohms all the way up here to 85 ohms. You can pretty much see what's going on. I think this is an incredibly powerful tool and it only costs 50 quid or something. I actually got a deal. At Christmas I got it for about £39. But I got it off eBay from a UK seller. I always make sure I deal with UK sellers. And if you want to know the total capability of what this thing does, shouldn't show you that. Okay, so if you really want to know what this thing can do, you should go to NanoVNA.com, and there's a very, very comprehensive one. Now you'll see lots of similar devices. This is a 2.8 inch, 2.9 inch screen. That's basically the same as mine. There are other ones. There's one with a 4-inch screen. Yes, it would have been nicer, but there's an awful lot of information about it. They all run the same firmware, so you can use this firmware on a whole range of devices. It tells you everything it comes with and a very comprehensive range of how it works. You can get the apps. I couldn't get that app to work a minute ago. You can get VNO Saver working, which we did get going. There's a web client, which is brilliant. You can use it on a mobile phone or any other browser. And I can't remember what the IP is for it. And then there's the menu structure map and lots of other things. There's some recognised sellers. Or you can take your chances on eBay like I did. I think it's an amazing device, and as I say, I'm not going to go into the more complex aspects of it because other people have covered it a few years ago so well. So I can't really see the need to replicate what they've done. I just thought I'd introduce the concept of a great measuring tool that's going to serve you for many years. For measuring antennas, filters, delay lines. You imagine that you're working satellites on 1.2 gigahertz. You are going to need an incredibly expensive piece of equipment if it was full hardware based. But to have a software based device like this, and it's based on an SDR, let's be honest, but it's got its own built-in signal generator. And I did notice actually that the signal generator on it only works on the fundamental up to 300 megahertz. Then it uses the third harmonic and the fifth harmonic. I think that's incredibly clever. I haven't tried it on anything that goes up to gigahertz, but if you're playing around with LoRa or 1080, 1090, is it ADSB? Those sort of things. LoRa's 868 megahertz. Well, they need to like an antenna about 1 inch long. And you can design these things and optimise them. I'll hold my hands up to say Andreas Speech did a brilliant article introducing that concept. His stuff is excellent as always, amongst many other people. Kevin Loffing. Those guys have covered other aspects of this that I don't want to go into. I just want to use it as a tool and get my ham radio set up the way that I want it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Please stay in touch. And if you want a little amusing thing to read, here's the current state of amateur, not ham, radio. Well, this is my personal opinion, and I'll let you read it. It's on techmaker.co.uk. I'll post a link on this video. Please do not take it seriously. It's my personal opinion with layers and layers of sarcasm, but I think it speaks a lot of how ham radio has changed over the last few years, and especially the last 2 years during the COVID era. So please have fun with that and give me your comments on that as well. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe as always. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, and comment if you don't. You're entitled to your opinion, and I'm entitled to mine. So 73s and all the best for now. And I can't find the thing to switch it off. So I also managed to get the NanoVNA app going that is on the NanoVNA website. Had a little comms issue with it before. I thought you'd like to have a look at it. Please excuse the one on the bottom, I can't turn it off. That's S21, which is just noise. This is showing the response in decibels. I need to do some work on this and find out how to use it. But you can see that the SWR, which no idea why it's being measured in decibels, is optimised there. It's not too bad at 14 megs. It's quite usable. Whatever band that is, I can't work it out to be at 18 metres. And then around 24 megahertz. It's not one I can transmit on. Sorry, but 21 would be quite reasonable there. And then I'm very aware that 10 metres does not perform on my antenna. It's just the wrong length for it, and I'm not bothered. I just thought you'd like a look at this because it's just a really nice program. Oh, there we go. I can freeze it. You can turn the amateur bands on and off. And again, you can set this up. It will copy the settings from the VNA for the bands that you're on for these settings, and loads of other stuff. I just thought you'd like to see the comparison. It's a really clean display on it. You can capture the displays and save them. It'll capture the display of the actual VNA itself, which is brilliant. So, can't say enough good things about it. Just thought you'd like a quick glance at that. You'll have to experiment with it. But what an amazing piece of equipment. So if you prefer to work on your computer's desktop, as far as I can tell, it's possible to drive, between these two programs, it's possible to drive the NanoVNA completely and to capture all the results as well. So I think it's a fantastic tool. So yeah, good luck with it. Hope you have as much fun with it as I'm having. There's just so much to learn. See you soon.